Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this May 22nd, 2013 edition of Nightcast. Opening story tonight, Ukraine checkpoint shooting leaves 14 Ukrainian soldiers dead.
The Ukrainian armed forces are telling us that this is as close as we can get now to the checkpoint just down this road where an attack took place, we understand, at about 5 a.m. local time, when armed pro-Russian groups arrived and opened fire on the Ukrainian soldiers manning that checkpoint. Now, the dead and injured have been taken to a local hospital. We are near the village of Olginka, about 40 kilometers south of the city of Donetsk, the unofficial capital of the breakaway eastern part of Ukraine. Now, this is clearly a huge blow for the Ukrainian army as they continue what they call their anti-terror operation, announced by the Ukrainian government in Kiev to try to secure eastern Ukraine and bring it back within Ukraine's control. But the separatist pro-Russian armed groups have long said that they would fight back against any attempts to clear them out, and that is clearly what has taken place today.
Friends, we have more video on this same subject. Thank you, Mark Lewin. Ukrainian soldiers have suffered the biggest loss of life so far during the crisis in the east of the country. At least 13 have been killed, other reports said 14, and dozens more injured in an attack by pro-Russian forces, with 3 days now until the country's presidential elections. This morning's attack took place at a military checkpoint, as you just heard Mark Lewin describing, on the outskirts of the town, 20 miles south of Donetsk. Here is Mark Lewin again with an update and more details.
The attack came before dawn and with devastating effect. This was a Ukrainian army checkpoint, targeted in the deadliest assault on the military since this conflict began. At least 13 were killed and around 30 injured in a well-planned strike.
3 of my friends have fallen, and I cannot even collect their bodies. Their combat unit has been lying there in the field for over 30 minutes already.
Separatist groups are thought to have carried it out. They showed off their spoils, which they say they took from the troops at the checkpoint. This unverified footage appears to show helicopters moving in after the incident. It's not confirmed to whom they belong, but the video was shot in daylight, and one Ukrainian soldier told us it was an operation against the separatists. At the local hospital, the dead kept coming, as serious injuries proved fatal. Another body is just being taken out of this vehicle into the morgue. This is a terrible blow for the Ukrainian armed forces and a reminder of quite what these armed separatists are capable of doing. A Ukrainian general would talk only with his identity hidden for fear of reprisals. They were professional killers, he told me, hired soldiers. They mowed down my men in 15 minutes. They're doing it for money, not for patriotic ideals. The Ukrainian government laid the blame at Moscow and its links with the armed groups in the east.
This is a confirmation that Putin's words are a lie when he talks of withdrawing troops and not interfering in the internal affairs of Ukraine. In reality, Russia continues to conduct a very aggressive military activity.
The attack comes just 3 days before Ukraine's presidential election that Kiev vows will also be held here. Separatist leaders say they'll block it, and the region is now independent. Could today have been a warning shot? Ukrainian forces secured the scene, but in this battle for control, the volatile east is slipping further from their grasp. Mark Lewin, BBC News, Volnovaka.
Friends, yesterday we played you video showing comments made by Prince Charles saying that Russia's President Putin, his actions were like those of Hitler. Russia has commented today and condemned those remarks reportedly made by Prince Charles as outrageous after it was said that Prince Charles likened Vladimir Putin's remarks or actions, Vladimir Putin's actions, to those of the Nazis. The Russian deputy ambassador discussed the situation with a senior Foreign Office official in London earlier today. Frank Gardner reports.
A harmless royal tour round a Canadian polar bear sanctuary. What could possibly go wrong? Well, comments made by Prince Charles during his Canadian tour have ended up touching a raw nerve in Russia. In a private, off-camera conversation in this building with a Polish-born émigré, the Prince of Wales reportedly compared the actions of President Putin in Ukraine with those of Adolf Hitler. Moscow first brushed it off, but by today it had turned into a diplomatic row. President Putin, visiting Siberia today, lost his own brother in the Nazi siege of Leningrad. He's often spoken of Russian sacrifices in the Second World War. A Russian spokesman called Prince Charles's reported comments outrageous.
We consider the use the Western media have made of members of the British royal family in a propaganda campaign that is being mounted against Russia on an acute international issue, which the situation in Ukraine is, unacceptable, outrageous and dishonourable.
The Russian embassy in London demanded an official explanation. What was the heir to Britain's throne doing, apparently making such remarks? Russia asked for and got a meeting with a senior British diplomat. This can't have been an easy conversation here at the Foreign Office this afternoon. It started out as a complaint by Russia's deputy ambassador against Prince Charles's reported comments, and it developed into a much wider, robust discussion of the whole course of events in Ukraine and Britain's dissatisfaction with Russia's activities there.
Friends, this is Thursday night, and Nightcast is off until Sunday night. After tonight, we don't do a broadcast Friday night or Saturday night. And by Sunday night, the European parliamentary elections will be well underway. In this next video, the BBC's Matthew Price reports from the European Parliament in Brussels, where the BBC will be covering the European election results on Sunday night.
So I'm up here on the 4th floor now. We're just doing a little bit of filming for a television piece that we're putting together ahead of the European elections. But if we make our way around here, this is the hemicycle, it's called, of the European Parliament, one of two. The other one's in Strasbourg, this one's in Brussels. And this is where MEPs, 751 of them there are going to be in the next Parliament, where MEPs from 28 EU countries debate and vote on legislation that affects people right the way across the EU. Now this area that we're in at the moment, they're setting it up for election night, but this is where broadcasters, including the BBC, including me, haven't found my spot yet, somewhere around there I think, we're going to be broadcasting from here on election night on Sunday on the BBC, both in Britain and around the world, so you'll be able to get a feel of what's going on in those elections and what they're going to mean for all the people who live across this continent.
And friends, related to elections in Europe, in Italy, a politician and comedian there leads an anti-establishment group known as the 5-Star Movement. It became a force in Italian politics at the last general election when it took 25% of the vote and stormed into Parliament in Rome. As Alan Johnston explains, the activists are now turning their wrath on Euroland.
Meet Italy's Angry Brigade, citizen activists of the 5-Star Movement. Their election campaign song rages at an unfair Europe, accusing it of helping the rich while it demands sacrifices from the poor. The movement's guiding star, Beppe Grillo, a comedian turned furious politician. He rails at the EU's waste and bureaucracy. The movement's view of Europe echoes its view of Italy, where it has MPs in Parliament. And sometimes they resort to shock tactics. a five-star invasion of the government's benches. The movement sees the entire political establishment as deeply corrupt and failing, here in Rome and in Brussels. The citizen activists have focused furious attention on all that's wrong with this country's ruling class. And the movement's MPs see themselves as channeling the mood of the masses.
There is frustration and anger because of how the system has been conducted us to this. That's why we have anger and these kinds of feelings. But we want to drive these feelings in a suggestion and a positive way.
The activists have succeeded in shaking up Italy's rotten political system, but the movement's weaknesses have also been exposed. Critics accuse its leadership of having an authoritarian streak. They point to the fact that dissidents within the movement's ranks have been booted out. And some argue that the citizen activists are good at pointing out problems, but less good at coming up with solutions.
They seem to be concentrated on destroying the present and attacking whatever is proposed, rather than really sitting down and presenting an organic, articulated agenda on how to move forward.
But the movement is riding a wave of anti-Europe feeling here, and Brussels needs to brace itself for the coming of some Italian-style people power. Alan Johnston, BBC News, Rome.
Friends, 31 people have died in a bomb attack in the northwest of China. Reports said that 2 vehicles drove into a busy market in the Xinjiang region and threw explosives into the crowd. The Ministry of Public Security called it a serious. The Ministry of Public Security called it a serious, violent terrorist incident. Damian Grammaticus reports.
Within minutes of the attack, pictures that began appearing on Chinese internet sites. Victims lie amid the wreckage of market stalls. Many were elderly, out doing their early morning shopping. It's mostly ethnic Han Chinese who live in this part of Urumqi, Xinjiang's regional centre. President Xi Jinping has said terrorists were responsible and must be punished severely, but the attacks seem to be growing. Violence rippling out of Xinjiang is now the biggest security challenge facing China's communist leaders. President Xi visited last month. He talked of harmony, but knife and bomb attacks on police and government workers are spreading across China, targeting civilians too. Xinjiang's Muslim Uyghurs are linked by language and religion to Turkey and Central Asia. On a recent visit to the old Silk Road city of Kashgar, we found Chinese security everywhere. Young Uyghur men are singled out for ID checks. The authorities are on edge, and violence has erupted in many towns.
Because of the pervasive security, many people here are afraid to talk to us openly. It could be dangerous for them. What's been whispered to us is that tensions and mistrust are on the increase between Uyghurs and Chinese.
If somebody finds that you have religious texts on your phone, they report you to the police, then you'll be arrested.
In another part of China today, police surround an aircraft. It was heading to Xinjiang but was grounded. 2 passengers taken away. Chinese security forces fearful. After this attack, more may be coming. Damian Grammaticus, BBC News, Shanghai.
Friends, Jonathan Head reports next from Bangkok, where a national curfew is in place in Thailand following a military coup.
The Army Club in Bangkok. Inside, rival political factions were holding reconciliation talks. Suddenly, the exits were blocked. Troops raced into position. Thailand was having another coup. The faction leaders were detained and taken away. And the man who'd invited them here, General Prayut Chan-o-cha, now runs the country. In time-honoured fashion, a new military council announced that the constitution was being suspended and a curfew imposed. General Prayut has now done what he vowed many times would offer no solution to Thailand's crisis, and mounted a full military takeover. He says he's done it for peace and stability, and yet there's bound to be strong opposition. Most of all from supporters of former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra and her tycoon brother Thaksin, the so-called red shirts. They've won every election for the past 15 years. Many of their leaders are now under arrest, but they've always said they would resist a coup with force if necessary. The anti-government protesters, the so-called yellow shirts, have long been calling for military intervention. After 7 months on Bangkok streets, they can now go home. That leaves the soldiers to sort out a chronically divided country. Their prospects for success don't look promising. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Bangkok.
Friends, in this update by Jonathan Head, this next video, which tells how the TV networks, including the BBC, have ceased normal programming during the curfew in place in Thailand.
The BBC is now off air, so is CNN. Most channels now only putting up the screenshot that the military has and playing martial music. So there were already tight restrictions on the media imposed under martial law 2 days ago. Now it is going to be very, very difficult. It's not clear yet whether the military will try to limit the internet, which is clearly where most information gets around. But I think they're very nervous. You've got to remember, this is not like the coup Thailand had 8 years ago, which was largely unopposed. This time round, the government supporters in particular, the ones who are called the so-called red shirts, huge numbers of them across the country, have vowed that they will resist any coup. And I think the military will be very, very wary of any attempts by them to organise. So we are having a lot of edicts being read out on television by the military. There's a curfew in place here from 10 o'clock. The army has said the only exceptions they will make is for tourists trying to get to the airport. Otherwise, nobody else should be out in the streets. And I can say that when we saw the soldiers surrounding all the faction leaders who were talking at the army base, trying to resolve their differences, they look very, very tense indeed, very well armed, ready to deal with trouble. This is not going to be an easy coup for the army, and I think there will be many problems ahead.
Friends, in an earlier video, we saw Prince Charles from England and Canada, and he was feeding a bear in that. And we, in today's news, I was able to find this little bear picture that I think is a good way to close tonight's report. This is from storm chaser Ricky Forbes, who filmed a straying bear cub being lifted out of danger from the side of a busy highway as the storm chaser was driving through Kootenay National Park in British Columbia, Canada. Friends, that's it for tonight. Sorry the mic was off for a moment there. That's it for Thursday night. As I mentioned earlier, we're off until Sunday night now. We'll be on the weekend on the SabbathService.tv channel for those of you that tune in for that. Otherwise, our next nightcast, news stories related to the day's current world news, related to the Bible and prophecy. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back with more of that on Sunday night. Until next time, this is your host from a very hot studio. That's why we're signing off early tonight, friends. We ain't got the air conditioning switched over up here, and I feel like I'm in an oven. So if I'm not thinking as clearly as usual, and if we hurried through things tonight, that's part of the reason why. But hope to see you from a cooler studio Sunday evening. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. So long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.